Good morning. My name is James Little, and my company is Mass Spec Interpretation Services. Today I will be discussing Wiley's newly released software for processing mass spectral data. It is a part of their vendor-neutral data processing solution called KnowItAll, which is utilized with a variety of spectral techniques including mass spec, NMR, infrared, and others. Today's presentation is entitled Identity Search of GCMS Data with Search It and Mine It. A series of training videos and associated handouts for KnowItAll mass spectrometry software can be found on my personal website. Before you can perform a mass spec search, you have to use Process It to get a mass spectrum. So let's go to the KnowItAll software, and we'll go Open Process It, which is already open, and I will not discuss this in detail because the previous video talked about this process. But there is background here, so I will take a background to get a spectrum. So the foreground to get the spectrum of the unknown, and then a background to get the corrected spectrum. And as before, you can push these menus up if you don't want to see that real-time display as you go across the peak. You can see I have a good spectrum to send to the search software. So to search something, you have to go up to the Transfer To at the top of the screen, and in this case we want to go to Search It, so we just click on Search It to transfer the spectrum to that part of the program. And we'll start a new search, which will create a separate tab at the bottom of the page if we want to get back to that information in the future. Now you can see that the background corrected spectrum from Process It has been entered into Search It. Search It is used to set up the parameters for the search. So the first thing we will select is the user select the search databases. We'll go up to the top, and since we're doing only GCMS, we'll pick only the libraries that are appropriate. We'll say Add All. And now we're ready to search. You could just search, but I want to make sure some of the other parameters are set properly. So I'll go back up to the top where it says Spectrum MSGC. I will left click on it. And now we're back at the top level again. So let's look at the number of components. I'm pretty sure it's not a mixture, so I'm just leaving it as single because it was separated by GCMS and the spectrum looks reasonable. We're going to use the dot product cosine, which is the basic identity search. You could select others, but I find this is by far the best. And we'll also want to go over to the advanced settings and take a look at that. The minimum required peak count, 5 will get some of the partial spectra. Some of the databases have partial spectra, so that's not an unreasonable value. You could turn that off or change that number if you'd like. A lot of times when you're doing simple searches, removing the duplicates and removing the replicates from the results you'll get makes them easier to look at. So that's a good thing to use. So let's say OK. One last thing, at the bottom you can see it says hit list size limit to 50. That's a reasonable number. You could say all hits, but that would just probably take a little bit more time, and you would never look that far down in the list anyway. So 50 is a very reasonable number there. And one other thing, while you're at the bottom of the screen, you can see this is the 13th search I've done. So it has information about the other searches that I've done that I can go back to at a later time. So now everything is set up, so we're ready to search. And what we're going to do is click the search button, and that'll transfer the results into the Mine It window. It's going to search about 1.2 million spectra. It just takes a second or so, and the results will show up in Mine It. Here are the results in Mine It. You can see on the top is my average spectrum, which has been background subtracted in blue. On the bottom is the best hit from the hit list with the highest quality index as far as goodness of fit. Over on the side, you'll see the structure of the best hit and some information in the textual window shown below. Now, if you want to step through some of these hits, you can just go click on number 1 below. Then you can either use your mouse scroll button, but I prefer the down arrow and up arrows on my keyboard to step through them. You can see the second hit It's just another spectrum of ethylbenzene that didn't get out of the list. The next one is 1,2-dimethylbenzene, an isomer, and it's a very good fit also. So it would just depend on your sample history to what would be the possible identity and maybe the retention indices or the boiling point relative to isomers, etc. The other thing that I want you to notice is you can pick the types of displays. So if you come up to this bar up here of all the icons, as you hover over them, it shows you what they'll do. I like the butterfly view where you put the unknown on top and the known on the bottom, and they're reflected against one another. But I also like the subtraction view. It's kind of nice also. It shows you the unknown on top and then the best hit on the bottom. And if we step through them, you can see there's very little difference between these top few spectra to show up in the different spectrum. So those are my two favorite displays. The other thing that I like is the fact that one can have the tabs that show the different hit lists that I've looked at since I've opened the software, and then you can step back through them and look at other ones without having to do the search again. One more thing, you're able to go back in history essentially to where you were before. So if you use this arrow, I'm all the way up at the top of the page, and if I hover over it, it says previous application. If you do the previous application there, of course it's going to carry you back to search it. And if you click on the summary after the search is done, it'll tell you something about the search results. It tells you how long it took to do it and how many entries were actually searched and the number of databases. To get out of the summary window, you click on Spectrum Mass Spec, and that takes you back to the top level. Now I want to show you how you would go back and get a second spectrum. You could do it one of two ways. You could click on previous application, but probably better here is just to go directly. You see the little arrow between the left and right arrow? You can select it and it shows you where you can go, and you can go back to process it there. So I'm going back to process it. We have the spectrum that we subtracted before, so I want to get another spectrum. I think I'll just move over. If I change my mouse pointer by going into the average range bar, I can change it so I can drag the whole thing, and we'll just drag the range over here. It's a little broader peak, so I'll grab the edges of it and make it a little wider, and pretty much got it where I want it. And I'll take the background peak over here and put it in front. But since it's gone to a little bit of higher temperature on the column, I think I'll add another background after it. And now I'm going to push this up like we did before, just so you can see the spectrum in a full pane. And we have the spectrum. Now we can go back up to transfer and say search it again. But this time we'll say again start a new search. It'll create a new search, but here we don't have to change any settings. We can just go directly to the search button and click on it, and we'll get the results for the other component. One thing I forgot to mention in the setup of the program is the fact that Minit sometimes comes out of the box as you install it without the implicit hydrogens on the nitrogen, which gives this display of the structure as shown here without the NH2s, especially on things on oxygens and nitrogens and sulfurs, etc. So to get a more appealing display, just come up to the top here where it says View and say Implicit Hydrogens, and the hydrogens are displayed. I hope you found this video on the identity search of GCMS data with SearchIt, Minit to be useful. I have a series of training videos and associated handouts for KnowItAll mass spectrometry software that are available on my personal website. So long.